Hi, welcome back to Examining Life. Today I am at the University of Ghana and I am speaking with Professor Ani. When I studied at the University of Ghana 5 years ago, I took Philosophy of Development with Professor Ani. So today we are going to be discussing some of his research. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit further?
I'm Dr. Emmanuel Ani. I teach at University of Ghana. I've been doing some research on African political philosophy.
So the first paper that we'll discuss is Salvaging Political Merit from Political Money Without Infringing on Liberty. Can you please give a summary of your paper?
My research has mainly targeted at democracy, our practice of democracy, and it has not been very smooth. There has been a lot of problems and people are complaining, and so I've delved into two directions of research. One direction is how we can get better candidates for our public offices. Then the other direction is how we can communicate in better ways with one another in our political debates and our deliberations in our electoral campaigns, how we can get better leaders. There has been an old problem of the influence of money in democratic politics. Now we're in a democracy, you need a ton of money to do the campaigns. And so if you did a military coup, it is cheaper. And the unfortunate effect is that money, being the bottom line, has become the utmost priority in selecting our leaders. What that means is that those with the most money are being given a large amount of advantage over the rest. A point system is to build a system of rewards in terms of points to public office holders for specific achievements in office. If a senator is behind the landmark legislation, there should be certain points we can award. If a president improved the economy, improved international relations, increased jobs, resolved a major ethnic dispute, there should be certain points for those things. Try to categorize points into two: productivity points and integrity points. Productivity points will be, obviously it is points for work done. And then integrity points are points for keeping one's hands clean.
Character, yeah.
Yes. So in my analysis, we can calculate productivity points by calculating amount of work done. Integrity points is not as straightforward to calculate. What I think we can do is to calculate integrity points by simply calculating the quantity of subtractions from integrity. And so there is no way of calculating integrity if someone has not been involved in something that lacks integrity. I think the best way we can do it is to assume that everyone has integrity and then to calculate what people are doing that lacks integrity and then generate them as negative points. If someone has been in a scandal, there should be some points for the scandal and then you go and subtract the points from the productivity points. The productivity points are the positive points, the integrity points are negative points. When you get the productivity points, if there is any negative points in the integrity department, you use it and as a subtraction from the productivity points. In the absence of such a point system, what we have currently is that someone could be the most hardworking person in the world and then a very minor scandal takes away the person's entire image, which I think is unfair. I think with time we quantified even scandals and tell ourselves what they are worth. And then we minus them from what we have also quantified as a person's. And so if the person has been in a single scandal, it might not be too damaging. If she has been in a series of scandals, then probably she's off. My inspiration is in how we appoint and promote people in certain institutions, including the universities. When you look at our university promotions, there are criteria for promotions. Teaching has a certain quantity of points. The student teaching reports gives you a certain percentage of points. If you have taught 6 courses and They involved a total of 500 students, and all the reports are brought. Normally, you could get 70% in this course, 50% in that course, an aggregate is found. That screens out a lot of confusion, the kind of confusion we see in today's democracy. In the absence of that kind of formalization, what we have is a lot of propaganda. Different political parties talking as much as they can, very often on irrelevant issues. In most cases, they degenerate to exchanging insults and a lot of criticisms and all that. Sometimes you suspect that it is the people who make the most noise and who spend the most money who win elections. When they get into office and they are inaugurated to start working, you begin to discover that they are not the kind of people you want in the office. And so I think it's because of the absence of a point system. No one has bothered to think about a point system. All we know is that we fashioned a system where we have elections. We say election day is on so and so date. You have your time to campaign, do whatever you want, but don't kill people. And then on election day, everyone will come and vote. That's a whole lot of confusion. And I'm not very sure that many voters know the candidates properly, except what they were told by the candidates. That also is another major lacuna which puts our democracies in trouble. I think a lot of democracies around the world are getting the wrong leaders. It is decreasing the popularity of democracy. There are a lot of calls now to replace democracy with something else. Well, you can also practice the point system in the absence of a democracy. You can just set up a system of points like we had in the universities. You send in your applications, you quantify your points, they will pass through offices, people will confirm your points, and then it will go to a body, and then the person with the highest number of points is simply given the position. There you don't need elective politics. We can also make it part of elective politics by computing the points of different candidates, but without imposing it on the voters. We compute the points of the different candidates, we publish the points, and we hope that the voters look at the points and allow the points to inform their decision. That way, we give the voters the freedom to consider the points and also consider some other issues. Now, there are three areas in which we assess candidates. We assess the records of candidates, we assess their charisma, and then we assess their opinions on public issues. Yeah, so if we decide that we want to make a point system a part of our elective politics, it means that we take care of the records, which is currently absent. We build your records, we publish them, or that we formalize or quantify your records as points. We publish the points, and then we allow voters to consider all three areas in taking their voting decision. They see the records, they have the freedom to disregard the records because of some issues they find with charisma or opinions. They are free to choose someone with less points but who has more cogent opinions, who has a more forceful charisma. And so, but my major problem with charisma is that if you go down in history, if you look at history, charisma has damaged us rather than it helped us. The most charismatic individuals, except Jesus Christ, have been the most disastrous. So charisma, in my research, doesn't have a good image. People who realize they have a lot of influence on other people when they speak end up being exploitative with that influence. So it hasn't worked well. That is why we need to formalize some level of quantification to the records part. The records part, nothing has been done well. During campaigns, politicians will tell you about their records. Journalists will also tell you about people's records, but I think that is not enough. We need a systematic, a scientific investigation of their records, and then a quantification of these records into points. I think we need that so that we bring some measure of comprehensiveness to, especially in comparing their records. When that is done, then I think you look more objectively at the charisma and then the opinions.
Thank you very much for summarizing your research. So I do have some questions. Who would make the criteria for the points and how much each action is worth? How much is each job created worth? Like, how many points is that?
Thank you very much. I was making suggestions about what can count as points, but I think that these suggestions are not to be taken as prescriptions, because we need to sit down and do some public deliberation about if we decide we want to deliberate about a point system. We need public deliberation that will deliberate on what can count as points, because when you look at jobs creation and losses, for instance, we need to determine to what extent the president of a country is responsible for the addition and the subtraction of jobs. When we determine that, then we would know to what extent they can be praised or blamed for job increases and decreases. And then we also need to determine to what extent presidents can be held responsible for the expansion of the economy, the contracting of the economy. And then we can also determine some other things that they could be more directly responsible for, such as improving international relations, or whatever a country tells another country has a lot of things to do with what the president of that country wants. So there are things for which we can credit the president more. And so all that needs to be investigated, deliberated. It's quite an elaborate challenge.
So change in general is typically a difficult thing for both individuals and society at large. What would be needed to convince the general population that this is the best system to implement, and how would they trust that it's going to be better? Say there's corruption in the current system. How would they know that there wouldn't be corruption in the system? I know that the integrity aspect is supposed to balance that out, and they would get points deducted if their integrity was in question because of corruption. But how would we fully trust that it's working properly?
Yeah, thank you very much, Amanda. New systems do not just happen, and then people are not usually not convinced by theories. People are more convinced by practices. A very feasible channel of bringing this to the world is that it could be practiced by certain small polities. It could be practiced on a small scale in certain institutions or certain municipalities. And so before you talk about practice, this system would need to be proselytized. We need to spread the message, we need to talk about it. So what I do is I go from one university to another to present papers on the system. When that is being done, then I guess the next step would be to begin to talk to politicians. But I'm hoping that before I begin to talk to politicians, I would have developed this idea to a very systematic level.
When you do become ready to talk to politicians to inform them about this type of system, what incentive will they have to change the system, assuming that the system would have to be changed from within? Given that fundraising for elections is, tangible, whereas like a point is not necessarily a tangible thing, and it's not even guaranteeing them re-election or election.
You see, that is one of the things I'm still working on. Right now, I do not see a clear incentive a politician would have to adopt a point system or to canvass for a point system, especially those politicians that have established themselves with monetary influence, also do not plan to work hard. If they feel threatened by the points of rivals or potential rivals, then they might not support the system. The issue of incentive is what we need to deal with before we even begin to talk to politicians. And the issue of incentive would also decide if ultimately we would rely on politicians to adopt a point system. We probably need to look investigate other stakeholders in the society that are powerful enough to canvass for a point system and would have the right incentives. So all that political homework need to be done before. I wouldn't like a good idea such as a point system to be marketed badly. The practical aspect of creating a point system has to be a public affair. And so the creation of jobs, the building and maintenance of infrastructure, the improvement of relationships, especially intergroup relationships, and there are so many other things that we could look at in routine office holders.
And one of your main arguments in the paper is so that if there's a point system, then politicians who are running for election would be able to resist taking on like campaign funds because their priorities would be more towards serving their constituents. As you mentioned, a lot of the times the money earned from campaign funds are for publicity. Now, if there's a point system, then their priority would be less on developing that sort of media and more on just serving their town or their country, depending on like what office they're running for. But how would they get the news out about what they've done if they don't have funds to relay that to their public? Like, or maybe not necessarily like the elimination of campaign funding, but like how much would that be reduced?
Thank you, Amanda. It's a very good question. If we are to practice a point system in an elective democracy, then I don't think we would see the disappearance of money in politics. But I suspect we would still see its significant reduction. But money will still be needed to communicate. Regarding the specific achievements of office holders, ultimately their achievements will be known because points would be published at intervals. So if we are running a point system, you have to publish people's points. People have to submit all information about their achievements, and then they also submit information about how the achievements can be verified. Investigators need to verify the achievements. Verified achievements can then be translated into points, and then the points will be published. So ultimately, whether you make the effort or not, your achievements will be known. Yeah, because all that will be done and then it has to be publicized. But in the absence of a point system, what we see is that people do a lot of propaganda about what they achieved. And you begin to get the idea that we're spending quite a lot of money on speaking about achievements than achieving. I think a point system would also reduce that because if you know ultimately that your points will be exposed, then it would be redundant to apportion funds to marketing it. Secondly, if you intended to communicate falsehoods about your achievements, you wouldn't do that because the truth will come out from points in a point system. And so either ways, you do not have a lot of incentive to say a lot of things about what you've done because they'll be said anyways.
And you mentioned that the points and evidence of those points, like how they were earned, would be published. Where would they be published?
There'll be suggestions about putting up offices for points givers, points analyzers, points investigators, and all that. And then there will be decisions about who should run the points. In some of my reflections, I suggested it could be given to the judiciary because that is the most trusted arm of government we have. And one of my arguments is that judges are the most experienced in dealing with matters of interpersonal comparisons, interpersonal conflicts, and I think that any conflicts arising from points will go to court anyways. Nevertheless, I think that if we are allocating judges to be points givers, would need to divest them of their judicial duties. They cannot double up as judges and points givers. I value their experience as judges, and I think they are the kind of people who would need to run our points. That would make things a lot easier. And when judges are dealing with these things, they will need to decide on channels through which they will be publishing the points, and so all those things could be done. The systems for gathering points, political aspirants have to submit their CVs, they have to submit documents, evidence of achievements, and then those things will be sent to points investigators, and then the point investigators will need to hand over their work to points analyzers, and then it will go to the desk of points givers. All that are practicalities that need to be sorted out. I think that a point system will change the trajectory of the intensification of politics. If candidates get more desperate in a point system, I don't think they would want to get power by raising more funds. I think that the intensification of politics in a point system is the increase in points, which is the increase in achievements. So one of my arguments is that a points system can only intensify politics in a way that satisfies all of us, because what we'll have is more achievements.
Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and let me know what you think would be the benefits of implementing a point system. Thank you. Bye.